and welcome back. This is Wisconsin Shoe Guy, and today we're going to do a shoe battle between two shoes. This is going to be the Alfred Sargent Moore and your Carlos Santos Handgrade Adelaides in a wine shadow patina. So let's get started. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is Wisconsin Shoe Guy, and our channel we talk about men's dress wear. It's all about footwear, and we talk about unboxing videos, general shoe knowledge, helping you understand the industry and what's happening with your shoes. We look at shoes critically to determine whether or not they're worth the price that they charge. We compare shoe to shoe to understand which one is the best of the same category, and then I interview experts in the field to get their take as well. Check out my playlists to see all my videos. Welcome back. This is Wisconsin Shoe Guy, and today we're going to look at the Alfred Sargent Adelaide and talk a little bit about how it compares to some others. I'm going to actually break this into different videos as I do it, but I'm going to be doing them in a row. One of my watchers actually suggested that I have a categorization where I look at the last and I look at some of the structural things like the sole and things like that separately. Then I look at the quantitative measurements. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do that for each of these. So I'm just going to repeat this piece in each of the videos as I compare this shoe to several others. So with that said, here we go. So the Alfred Sargent Moore is an Adelaide. It is a cap toe Adelaide. So Adelaides can come with a cap toe or it can come with a medallion toe. I've never seen them with a plain toe, but I'm sure that that's possible as well. They have heel counters usually, although that is also an option. So like there's an Alden Edmonds Adelaide called the Cornwallis that does not have heel counters. And actually has a medallion, right? But no cap. So there's a lot of different options that you can do. As we look at this particular one, we are going to look at the last first. Now the last is a very important part of the shoe, right? It is the overall shape and is going to give you the overall impression of the shoe when it's on the ground. This is especially important for hole cuts because hole cuts have very little adornment, right? They're just a plain piece of leather. And so the last is going to be what overall is the shape of the shoe. Well, that's true on a cap toe Oxford as well. The cap toe Oxford has a cap, but the vamp here really gets its structure and shape from the last. And so you can have a hole cut shoe or a cap toe Oxford shoe that can look like a clog, or you can have one that looks like a very sleek piece of footwear. So it's important to note. So as we look at the last here, this is a good sweeping last. It has a nice line as it comes back toward the heel. Okay, so the way that it gradually goes back is really good. It has plenty of room here for your foot. So I have a relatively wide foot, and I actually sized down for this in order to be able to get it. So the ball is a little bit on the tight side, but the rest of the shoe, the volume at the front is really, really good for my foot. A little bit of pinching here on my pinky toe, which I may have to put a shoe stretcher in order to accommodate, but so far so good. The heel is nice and tight, so you get that nice splush when you put your foot in. You know, use a shoehorn, right? Everybody says that. I don't always, but what I do is I hold the back of it as I pull it onto my foot. And I do like to have the splush to make sure that my heel is secure, because nothing is worse than having the heel slide on your foot. If that happens, then you get blisters, and that sucks. So anyway, the other thing that I really like about lasts is the way the toe is like a chisel, right? So this has this part here, it narrows, and then it has a relatively flat part here. Now it's not a square. Sometimes they'll call this a soft square. And there is a lot of variety when it comes to this in shoes. So as you look at the series of videos with the Alfred Sargent compared to the other one, you'll see that there are some that are more rounded than others, and some that are quite sharp. Now that is also true here, where it rises on the sides. So that can be a really big change in the shoe. So as the last goes, right, you have the way the toe is, you have the sides, okay? And then you have the shape here, this sweeping part, okay? And then of course you have the heel and how well that fits to your foot. Okay? Now, some shoes are going to have a high instep last and some are going to have a low instep last. What does that mean? It means that the amount of leather here can vary. A lot of times what people want is they want a shoe that has very little in the way of a V-gap, okay, where this part just comes together very, very closely. And that can look really good, but a V-gap doesn't mean that the shoe doesn't fit you well. Sometimes if you have no V-gap up here, the shoe can be much too big. So it's a real catch-22, right? I prefer to have it with very little V-gap, but at the same time, if there's no V-gap and they come together, that's sometimes a sign that the shoe is too big. So something to keep in mind as you're looking at sizing and trying to keep it in. Now, the other piece, of course, is that leather does stretch, so you could have a V-gap on day one. I have a pair of CNES Adelaides that when I first got them, the V-gap was about 1.5 inches, and now it's down to almost 0. So again, it depends on the quality of the leather and how much they'll stretch. The higher end shoes stretch less, but they still stretch. It's leather, right? So something to consider. So anyway, so that's the last. So let's look at the sole. This is part of the Alfred Sargent exclusive range and has a really nice sole. It has a beveled waist, has a blind stitch sole. Now, this is also made with an oak bark tanned sole. So the leather is very, very long lasting. I have another pair of these that I've had for about a year and the wear is about the same as this. So it just wears off the ink that you do when you wear it the first couple times, and then it will just last and last and last and last. This is now, like if you look at a JR sole, that's a double oak bark tanned, and that will last longer, but this is also much better than, you know, some of your chrome tan soles or something like that is available on some other shoes. Now, how long should a sole last? This is a really, really hard question to answer because soles are really dependent on the way you walk. It's your the surface that you're walking on. It's your weight, the way you walk. Sometimes people have they walk like this. Okay, and so you can wear down the sole here, and it doesn't really matter where you wear the sole down first. Once the sole is worn down in one particular area, it's time to replace it. You know, you can't replace part of the sole. I know some people have done things where they replace only the front half and so forth, and you can do that, and it saves some money, but it really doesn't lengthen the length of the sole because you do want to make sure that you're using the same stitch holes on the welt. Otherwise, you have to replace the welt, and when you replace the welt, that actually diminishes the life of the sole a lot, which is another reason that a lot of people prefer to go to a cobbler instead of sending their shoes to the factory, because the factories have to put so many shoes through the rotation that they'll actually remove the welts and put new welts on because it's actually faster for them. So something to consider. So like when I used to send my shoes to Allen Edmonds to have them recrafted, and it's a fine practice, right? But the shoes can only be recrafted 3 times, and then after that, and I've actually had it where on the second time they were too tight, and it was because the new welt went on and it was just a little bit tighter. So food for thought. But anyway, this is the Alfred Sargent. That is the last. That is the sole. You can see the heel here has this beautiful split here with a lot of leather and a little bit of rubber. That actually helps it wear down slower, which is all about extending the life of the shoe. So that is the Alfred Sargent. So now let's look at the Carlos Santos. The Carlos Santos has a really, really sleek last, very similar in proportion to the Alfred Sargent. Has the nice soft square at the top, but has more of a ridge this way. So it has a ridge on the toe, and then it comes up here. So the last is significantly different and provides another look to the way that the shoe is going to look on your foot and kind of make your foot look. So a lot of people say that this will make the shoe look a little bit longer, right? Because it angles down a little bit, and in some senses the shoe could be longer. But as you can see here, you know, the shoes are remarkably close to the same length anyway. So it's not a true difference. But I think if you look at them like this, you can see how similar they are. When you look at them like this, you can see how that makes a difference in the way the shoe comes together, because that angle right there is just different on the shoe. Now that has a little bit more of what I think a lot of people would call an elegant line to it. So that's different. Now Carlos Santos is good. As you look at the shoe, the rest of it, you know, the proportions and everything on the top are pretty nice. When you look at the sole, this is their Handgrade line, and you can see I don't have as much wear on this as I do on the Alfred Sargent, but this has a very narrow waist, and actually I have about the same amount of wear. It just doesn't wear as much, so that is an interesting thing. The ink tends to stay better on the Carlos Santos shoe, but the sole is very well made. It is also blind stitched. It does have a beveled waist. It has that combination heel. And so if we look at them side by side, the real trick on this is going to be how long it will last. Now, I don't believe, and I could be wrong, and I would love for one of the experts out there on Carlos Santos to chime in, but I don't believe that these are oak bark tan soles. I believe that they use a different tanning process for the soles for Carlos Santos, and so that could be a material difference. The soles feel a little different, but I can't tell whether that's the paint or whether or not that's the actual leather, because they're not really worn down. They do gouge quite a bit, which I think is interesting. I don't usually have a lot of gouging on my soles, so so you get that on here, and you know I walk across rocks a lot. I have a lot of stones and stuff on my yard, so that could be part of it. Not walking as much as I do during you know, non-COVID times, but I walk the dogs a few times a day, and I've taken these on dog walks a few times, which is how I've been getting wear on all my shoes, and you know, they're just not wearing down, which is great. So now they have a bunch of nails in the sole, but so they do the nail pattern here, the 1, 2, 3 versus just the 4 in the corners. The rubber insert here says Carlos Santos on it, which is kind of cool. But that's not going to be replaced the first time you have the heel done, and you can see also that the rubber part is much larger on the Carlos Santos than it is on the Alfred Sargent. So some interesting pieces there, and we'll get into the details later. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at some of the finishing on these shoes. So we're going to start with the Alfred Sargent. And I think that the Alfred Sargent has a good amount of finishing, but some of it is left intentionally plain. And so that's going to be part of what we're looking at today, is what is left intentionally plain, and what is not. So we're going to start with the pinking, right? And the pinking is the area along the cap, along the edge, along the top line. And I'm going to say that this pinking is relatively fine. I do find it helpful to actually measure the pinking, because sometimes that can help determine whether it's actually finer or not. And this is looking at like 3mm pinking, and it is consistent across the whole shoe. When it comes to fudging, and fudging is along the edge here on the top of the welt, when they take that wheel and they put in that really nice pattern, there is no fudging on the Alfred Sargent at all, not even on the inside. So it's relatively straightforward. Now the sole edge itself, which is right here, okay, this has been finished. So it has a ridge at the top, and it has a ridge at the bottom, okay, and you can feel that. And then when it comes to actually by the waist where it's beveled, the sole has like a rounded edge along the edge there. So it's rounded here, or beveled, okay, and then it's ironed with the groove at the top and the bottom all the way around here. So it's like a 180 iron, and then the rest of that 270 is got that bevel shape to it. Now the heel itself, somebody used a wheel and artistically did a little finishing piece on the edge there as well. As I stated earlier, the heel cap, or the heel counter, is actually in 2 pieces with a seam down the middle. There is stitching on either side of that seam instead of just having a plain seam, and of course there's the flap over the top as well, which is pretty common on these. The counter actually extends beyond the heel. These heels, as I said before, are actually really short, and usually they that centimeter where it is short is normally taken up by the heel actually going out there. So that's an interesting detail there. I think they wanted to make room for the bevel, That's just my opinion, but again, I'm not a shoemaker. I have no idea in terms of why they would do that, so that's just my assumption in looking at it. And of course, we said on the sole before, the sole is beautiful, has all this, you know, it has the bevel waist, and it has this, you know, blind stitch on there as well. When we look at extras, you know, there isn't a lot of hand stitching. When it comes to the skiving, and what skiving is when you put a toe cap on, and you know they don't actually have the leather going all the way underneath, so the cap doesn't go over. They're actually joining two pieces of leather here. What they do is they thin the leather so that this gap from the cap to the vamp is as thin as possible. And I'm going to say that they did not skive this extremely thin. When I look at some of my other shoes, which I'll look at in my in the different battles here, I know that is actually thinner. Now, in terms of actually measuring it, I can't tell whether that's actually a whole millimeter of thickness or not. I will tell you that it's thicker than my tape. Okay, so I'm gonna say it's more than a millimeter, and I'm gonna use that as my judge. Right? Is it thicker than the tape? Can I still feel the tape when I put the tape on top of it? And in this case, I do. So that's gonna say I'm gonna say that those edges are on the thick side. On the Alfred Sargent. In terms of other pieces, that's the last things we're going to measure are the density of the stitches. Okay, and this is just a very, very straightforward measurement. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.5. 4.5 stitches per centimeter across the top here. I always measure at the cap toe on Adelaide's because it's always the same. And then when it comes to the sole, this is normally 3. For the sole, it is, I'm going to say 3.5, almost 4. Almost 4 stitches per centimeter on the sole. So that is the Alfred Sargent. So hey, we're going to get to the Carlos Santos, and now we're going to talk about finishing. And finishing is where you see, it's where you kind of separate the men from the boys in terms of the big shoes, right? So as we look at these, the question is going to be, where does the finishing measure up compared to the Alfred Sargent? So first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about pinking. And the pinking is the line that goes along here and on the throat. There is no pinking on the top line here. Unlike the unlike the Alfred Sargent's, it is perfectly smooth at the top, but there is pinking on the cap, the U-throat, and the heel counter. So as we look at the measurements on the pinking, it is 2.5 millimeters. When we look at the thickness of the skiving, that's an interesting thing. When you put your hand here, your hand is perfectly smooth from the tape to the cap, meaning the tape is about 1 millimeter thick. So that means that they skived this better than they skived the Alfred Sargent, which has a definite ridge, a pretty thick ridge. Maybe it's even a whole millimeter. So I think that's an interesting tidbit of information. When we go to the sole edge, what's interesting here is that it has it is ironed all the way around, but this is perfectly smooth. This does not have a ridge on the top and a ridge on the bottom. So there's a machine that they use when they're actually finishing the sole. And I've seen this at a cobbler where they can actually cut that little groove into the sole. And here, what they elected to do instead was they elected to sand it. Okay, perfectly smooth. Now, what's also interesting is that they did that at 180 degrees, so it goes from here to here. And then at the waist, okay, and remember they have a beveled waist, they have a beveled edge on the sole so that the bevel kind of matches in with the sole. So that's kind of a cool thing to do. They have an edge going around the sole here, but what's interesting about this is that this sole edge is actually about twice as long. Okay, like the actual groove that they cut into this, instead of being this wide, is that wide. So it's easier to see. So that's what's funny is that it's easier to see when the light is good. When the light is not good, it's harder to see, and you can't feel it. Where on the Alfred Sargent, you can actually feel it. So even though it's smaller. Let's see, from an extra standpoint, this is also blind stitched. It has very nice. It has the bevel. Very, very similar in that nature. It has more nails. We talked about that. From a clicking standpoint, this is not 2 pieces for the heel. They actually cut it so you could use 1 piece and just had to have the little seam at the bottom. So a little bit different there. We talked about the skiving already, which is a little bit better. The heels do match up perfectly with the heel counter, which is nice to see. So there's a symmetry there that they added. In terms of asymmetry, these are symmetrical. So nothing there. So very similar to the Alfred Sargent in that respect. If we look at the stitch density, the upper stitch density is 1, 2, 3, 4, a solid 4. So it's a solid 4 across the upper here, 4 stitches per millimeter. And then when we look at the sole, I have to get through the fudging. And I said that there's fudging along those angles there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait until I can actually see the stitches, which is hard to see. And I will say, yep, there are 3 stitches, 3 sole stitches per centimeter. So pretty standard on that measurement, but some are better, including the Alfred Sargent, which was at 4. So pretty exciting stuff. Thank you for watching.
So what does that mean? Shoe battles are hard because at some point you got to declare a winner. And today we've got a shoe that's $690 in the Alfred Sargent Moore. We've got a shoe that's $406 in the Carlos Santos. And that is a huge difference in price. When you look at it pound for pound, there's very little where the Alfred Sargent is winning out. If you look at patina, the patina on the Carlos Santos has a lot more depth and a lot more flexibility in the different colors that you can get than the Moore. Now, if you don't like it and you just like plain single colors, you can get that in Carlos Santos too. But I tend to like the way that this looks. I would polish it to look like this on my own, and so it saves me a lot of time. That said, that's a very small piece, right? When you look at the style overall, the Carlos Santos has a much wider U-throat, has a much narrower overall at the top, so it has that taper that's much better, that has an absolute change in the way that it looks on the foot. The last is very, very sleek, has a very, very strong ridge, has a very strong slope right here, compared to the Carlos Santos, or compared to the Alfred Sargent, which has a very high slope and generally a more, it's not as aggressive. I'm gonna use that term a lot in my shoe battles from now on. I'm gonna say that the Carlos Santos is a more aggressive last than the Moore. I will say that the Moore is a more refined last. Okay, they both have beautiful sweeping shape. They both are absolutely gorgeous shoes. The question is what's going to fit better in your wardrobe and how you do it. From a sole perspective, they're both blind stitched. They both have beveled waists. They both have narrow waists. It's not exactly the same. And again, I don't know what material this sole is made out of, but it is a high quality sole, right? The wear is slow. The leather quality is perhaps the hardest thing to judge, and yet the most important. And if I'm going to say which one is higher quality, I have no doubt in my mind that the Alfred Sargent is slightly higher quality. Now that said, the quality on the Carlos Santos is very, very good. Okay, but perhaps Carlos Santos uses the whole hide of the leather, and perhaps I think candidly that they both use the whole hide of the leather, and that you know, you're have as much opportunity for imperfection. I think probably Carlos Santos spends more time on the patina because it can it can cover up any imperfections there are in the leather, where the Alfred Sargent is more open and you see the natural grain of the leather. Now, okay, so maybe, right? But that, again, that's hard to tell. But there is a huge difference in price between $400 and $690. Okay. Now, from a finishing perspective, this has your fudging. This has a smooth edge. It has the bevel on the waists. It has better skiving, and it has a better clicking in order to cut the leather. Okay. These are objective measurements. That's just the way it is. But if the quality of the leather on this is better, quality of the leather is better. They're both factory made shoes. I would venture to guess that Alfred Sargent is right on the edge of where they decide to hand last it, but I don't know. So as far as I know, it's machine lasted, it's machine welted, everything is done by machine. And if that's the case, for the for $690 compared to $406, buy the Carlos Santos. The Alfred Sargent is a beautiful shoe. You can get it on sale. I got it on sale as a factory second. I have no regrets at all. I wouldn't have had any regrets if I had paid full price for this. I've paid full price for a number of shoes that are far lower quality than this, and I feel really, really good about it. I will say that this has more style on the lacing, and that is better. And I do like the more elegant last for me. But again, this is a pretty darn elegant last. It's a little more aggressive, yes, but it's very, very nice. So pound for pound, the Carlos Santos has it, and the Alfred Sargent is a luxury item that if you want to get both, you buy that too. But if you can only buy one for these two, my money has to go to Carlos Santos because it's just really, really good for what it costs.